Pennsylvania, the bill's sponsor, for 5 minutes.
I move to strike the last word and speak on behalf of H.R. 1435. First, I want to thank Chair Rogers for holding this markup on these 3 bills dealing with the automotive industry and the administrator's attack on consumers' choice. I ask unanimous consent to enter coalition letters from the many businesses represented, the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers and the National Propane Gas Association, into the record. These letters demonstrate the support of H.R. 1435 from industries that are critical to my constituents for their everyday needs. Let's be honest, mobility is essential for our American way of life. It is critical economically to move goods and get people to their jobs. It's critical culturally to give Americans the freedom of movement. It's critical in healthcare to give people access to the doctors, the hospitals, and the specialists that they need. Americans have built their lives around reliable and affordable transportation, and now government overreach is threatening to put the cars and trucks out of reach for the working class Americans. California's new Advanced Clean Cars 2 regulations does just that. These regulations would require 35% of new cars to be EVs by 2026 and fully 100% of sales to be EVs by 2035. The only thing standing in the way of these regulations being implemented is a required EPA waiver. That is why I, along with Representatives Latta, Bilirakis, and Obernolte, introduced H.R. 1435, the Preserving Choice in Vehicles Purchases Act, to prevent the EPA administrator from granting a waiver to any regulation that would directly or indirectly limit the sale of use of new motor vehicles with internal combustion engines. Although starting in California, Section 177 of the Clean Air Act will ensure that once adopted, an internal combustion ban will spread across the nation, disrupting the entire American auto market and ultimately limiting what my constituents are able to buy. 17 states, including my home state of Pennsylvania, have already adopted California's clean air regulations. These states represent over 40% of the American auto market. And any electric vehicle mandate on that large of a scale is a de facto mandate. It's a de facto mandate on the entire market and represents a decisive shift in national policy. Even the Biden administration admits that the effects that this would have on the consumers nationally. Recently, on June 22nd, in front of the Environmental Subcommittee, Joseph Gottman, the principal deputy administrator for the EPA's Office of Air and Radiation, acknowledged this reality. The problem is that in rural America, EVs cannot fulfill the needs of hardworking Americans or their families. They can't drive the distance. They can't maintain their charge, whether it's in hot or cold weather. They can't recharge fast enough to keep people on the move. And for these reasons, Americans simply don't want to buy them. Last month, we heard testimony, in fact, from Scott Lambert, the president of the Minnesota Auto Dealers Association. His position was very clear. The auto dealers were not anti-electric, far from it. In places like St. Paul and Minneapolis, where there is a market for EVs, they're happy to sell them. But the cold winters and the rugged terrains of states like Minnesota and my home state of Pennsylvania require more than what the electric vehicles can offer. To strip constituents of that choice is government overreach at its worst. Again, Biden administration officials appear to recognize that. On May 2nd, when asked if he supported banning internal combustion engines, EPA Administrator Reagan responded, and I'm quoting, "No, not at all." When asked if he supported consumer choice in vehicles, he responded, "I don't see," and I'm quoting, "I don't see a near future where we don't have a fuel supply that complements electric vehicles and provides customers choice." Again, in Joseph Gottman's June 22nd testimony, he also reiterated the commitment not to support a ban on internal combustion engines. As I have made clear before to this committee, H.R. 1435 is not anti-electric vehicle. Those who can afford it, those who want it, an electric vehicle, they should be able to buy it. But it does not help constituents in any of our districts to require them to buy an EV regardless of their needs and regardless of their wants. This policy would harm working and middle-class families by making cars less capable and thousands of dollars more expensive for the people who can least afford it. Only by taking government's thumb off of the scale and letting the free market decide will Americans get the efficient and affordable transportation that they want and that they need. I urge my colleagues to support this important legislation. Thanks again to Chair Rogers for holding this important markup today, and I yield back.